Hey everyone, welcome to the Afterlife podcast. This is your host, Pooja. Today I am very excited to interview Dr. Ingrid Honkala. Dr. Honkala became aware of other life dimensions from her near-death experience at the age of 2 and was gifted with the wise input from the beings of light. This helped her face the challenges of growing up in her native country, Colombia, and finding her destiny as a scientist and a giver of light. Her worldwide oceanographic surveys and her love for travel have brought her to 56 countries. Throughout her journey, she faced deadly war zones, underwater explorations, and time at a NASA research center. She learned any human experience can be illuminated from within. In her autobiography, A Brightly Guided Life, How a Scientist Learned to Hear Her Inner Wisdom, Ingrid details her amazing journey with the beings of light. Welcome to the show, Ingrid.
Oh, thank you so much, Pooja, for having me here. It's just an honor to be here with you today.
And it is an honor for me to interview you. In a way, it's a dream come true because I first heard about your story during COVID. It's been a couple of years. And ever since then, I've been wanting to read your book and have a conversation with you, and I'm finally able to do it. So, without wasting any time, I would love for you to share your near-death experience story with us.
Yes. I'm happy to share. Yes, what happened back then, Pooja, was that I was close to 3 years old. And I live in Colombia with my parents, my sisters, and every time they went to work, they would leave us at the care of a maid. And she was a lady that really didn't pay much attention to the things we were doing when my parents were not around. And one day, 6 in the morning, they left, and she went to do her own thing to her room to listen to her soap operas. And my oldest sister, that was close to 4, and I realizing nobody's paying attention. Let's go play in the patio. And the reason playing in the patio was not a good idea when an adult was not around is because in this patio there was a big tank, and the purpose of this tank was to collect water for hand washing clothes. And it was a big tank. It held about 900 gallons of water. And my oldest sister and I, the moment we saw the tank, we found a ball. Let's play cash across the tank. You know how we always want to do what we're told not to do.
Yes.
And then we grabbed the ball, we climbed the walls of the tank with some stools because it was pretty high. And then she sat on the flat surface that I used for scrubbing, so she was a little bit safer. I went to the other edge of the tank and I bended my knees. I was leaning very precariously, but hey, at that age, it was just like, we're having fun. And then my sister, she threw the ball. She didn't apply enough force. The ball fell on the water. It was floating. And of course, I thought, I can just grab it. I leaned forward. And the moment I touched it, it rolled. And I lost my balance and fell in the tank. Wow, the first feeling was the sense that this water was frigid cold. And Pooja, people have the misconception that because I am from Colombia, I come from hot weather country, but Bogota is very high up in the Andes. So the temperature in this water probably was about 30, 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So the moment I felt the temperature of this water was like, and it was this frigid feeling of like, whoa. And then from there it was this sense like, why I cannot breathe. So it was this kind of double impact of feeling cold. And now I didn't know at 3 years, almost 3 years old, that if you fall in the water, that if your head is underwater, you cannot breathe. And I enter into this state of panic, like, how can I get out of this water, of course? And I'm like, and then the incredible thing happened. I am in this state of horror. And from this horror, in just like that, Pooja, I went from that state of horror to complete peace. It was the sense of like, oh, I don't need to breathe anymore. I don't need to escape from this tank. I don't need to do anything. And then one thing that people usually ask me is that, how can I remember this? I was so little. And I always have to go and mention this contrast. And I say contrast because this experience had a lot of contrast. First, of course, what I already mentioned, the sense of like this call, the sense of horror, the sense of peace. So that right there was the first big thing. After that is like, I said to people that this tank was very dark. It was entirely made of cement. It had a roof on top. It was very early in the morning. So the last thing I saw with my eyes open was the darkness of the space. And the first thing that I saw when I entered into that state of absolute peace was light. And it was a light that came from below. And then it was this, oh, now there is light. The other contrast I experienced is that I live in a house that was very noisy. And the last thing I heard when I was drowning was my heart. And it was beating really loud. Like I could hear it in my head. Imagine that state of panic. And I'm like, boom, 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 boom. And it was gone. And when I entered into that space of serenity and peace, there was silence. And Pooja, this is a silence that I call a silence behind the silence, because it wasn't just the silence when you're like in a disco or something and now the noise stopped. No, it was this silence that comes from serenity, peace, enjoy, just this And that silence was so incredibly amazing that for the rest of my life, I craved that silence. So later, when I was out of this experience, throughout my childhood, later when I was younger, I will hide in closets under beds. And later I would go to church. I wanted that silence back. And then the other big contrast is that I was born as a very sick child. And people sometimes wonder how a child can become to this born or come to this world like this. And in my case, like I have discovered through time, everything has a purpose. And this challenge for me was to show me at that moment again that contrast. For almost 3 years, I was always sick. I didn't even know any other state of being than being sick. I was born with respiratory problems, always feeling really sick. And then at the moment, I'm experiencing this state of complete and absolute well-being. Wow, freedom, the sense like, oh, I don't have the burden of this body, feeling sick like that. What do you think I did, Pooja? I look at that body and I'm like, I'm not going back there. But this is the other incredible thing, that I had the awareness that I could make that decision. And then I look at the body. I said, I'm not going there. I turned around and I left the body behind. So I said, people, how can I forget all this? And then when the moment I left the body behind, I started to see flowers. And these flowers were blooming from nowhere. And then I was picked by the flowers. So even the sense of dimension disappeared. And now I'm like, and I'm just like, oh, so relaxed. Like I'm just floating in these flowers. And I put the analogy that is like going back to the womb. You don't have to do anything. You're just being carried. You're just being done. And then I am in this state of bliss when in just a blink like that, suddenly I appear in the maid's room. And I'm looking at her from above, and I'm like, oh, that's Maria. And then this is so real that I could even remember the soap operas she was listening in the radio. And then the moment I said, this is Maria, nothing happened. So from there, like in another blink like that, I appeared in my mom's path. My mom was walking.
Yeah.
She was on her way to work, and she didn't have a car, and she was close to her bus stations, her bus stop, when I appear above again, and I'm like floating there, and I'm like, oh, that's mom. The moment I said those words, which I said, that's mom, she stopped. She did not hesitate. She did not give another step. She just turned around and started to run home. And then I looked at her, I'm like, why is she running? And then I got distracted at that moment. The moment I turned to look at my mom, I see a dog at the end of the street. Mm-hmm. And the moment I see the dog and I feel the desire to be with the dog, I am with the dog. Mm-hmm. This is cool. And then at that moment, I changed my view and I saw a park. And the very moment I felt the desire of being in the park, I am in the park.
Wow.
Now I'm like having the incredible time of having fun, because I realized that that constraint of time and space was gone and I could be anywhere, anytime. Mm-hmm. And I started to play this game of going places. And when I'm playing this game, having fun, in another blink like that, I appear in a realm that was made of pure, intense, shiny light. And I'm like, oh, this is the first time, Pooja, in my almost 3 years of life that I felt, oh, I am back home. I am home. And it was that sense like this was familiar. Like that's why you call it home. Like I'm back. And although at that moment I didn't see anybody, it was the sense I wasn't alone. Like when you get home and the rest of your family is in the other room, and you just feel like this is so good. And then this is the other thing. Although I've seen my body in the water, up to this point, I didn't have the realization, that clear realization, I am not that. I'm not that body. And at that moment is that I'm not that body. I'm not that persona. I'm not that. Mm-hmm. And it's when I had this realization, I am a being of light. Mm-hmm. And the moment I have this sense, it was an enormous, I could just call it probably sense of expansion. Mm-hmm. And but I was still having like a sense of self, but when I experienced that, call it expansion, or that knowing, I experienced something beyond that. And I enter in this state where I call it nothingness or non-self. It was that, and now I even have more and more clarity about it. It was that knowing that I am beyond what we could name as concept, name, form, ideas, colors, forms. And it was this state, if I could say anything, it would be a state of pure presence and pure. And nowadays, understanding it even deeper is what I call also the state when you feel expansion and you feel wholeness, you're interconnected. You're connected with absolutely everything else. So it was that sense of complete expansion. And when I am in this state of being, Pooja, my mom finally arrived home. And this is the other incredible thing. And is one, I have to say, my mom had this amazing intuition, but it was important that she listened to that intuition. because that intuition brought her to run and now to know where to go.
Mm-hmm.
And when she entered the house, if she would have waited more time going anywhere else in the house, the body cannot take it. But she directed herself to the back of the house.
Wow.
And there in the time was still my oldest sister. And she looked at my mom and she said, Mom, Ingrid is there and I cannot get her. Because she was trying until that moment to get me out, but she was too little. And then my mom got in the tank, she got me out, and she said that I was like a raggedy doll, that it was no pulse, no breathing, nothing. And then my mom, this is the other incredible thing, how the synchronicities in life, how things happen, and everything again carries a purpose. My mom had learned to do CPR, and she worked with children, and she had learned to do CPR for children, and she did whatever she knew to do, and I was back. But the moment that she was doing all this, I did not feel absolutely anything. I was completely disconnected from this physical reality.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, I'm just in my state of expansive being. And it's when I felt that I had jumped from the tallest building in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It was this sense of vacuum, like when you jump from point zero and you feel this. And then I felt that I was being pulled and there's nothing I could do, Pooja. And I was like, no. And then when I'm back in the body, I know I'm back because that sense again of fear and the sense of coldness and pain and the lack of freedom. And then another emotion that was very present, anger. I did not want to be back and I was very angry. So yeah, after that, then many things happened that were hard for my parents and for me because I did not want to be back at that point.
I can only imagine. I cannot imagine, but just listening to you, the contrast between being outside the body and being inside your body and being a child, I don't know how you did it. I would have a very hard time after being outside like that to identify, like, did you struggle with that? Having some kind of I would have had a crisis of identity at that point. Did you struggle with that at all?
Enormously, enormously. And that makes things very hard because I could not identify with my body. And, I have here other near-death experiences when people say that this cannot be possible, but I experienced it myself in which I completely disidentify and disconnected from my persona, my body, my name. So when I came back, I had this clear realization that I'm not this body. I'm not this name. Yeah. And I would just cry and tell my mom, you don't understand, I'm not this. And I would tell her, I'm not this child and this is not my name. So imagine my mom, that all were like, what is going on with this child? And I would look at other children and I could not relate. Yeah. Because what is happening to these people? They don't know anything. And I would look at my parents and I now have this, because I had experienced the state of oneness, the state of expansive being, wholeness. I look at them and I'll be like, yeah, you're like, they were not just my biological parents. To me, they were my equal. So imagine, Pooja, I became very, very rebellious. Wow. And I entered this state in which I didn't want to eat. I didn't want to hear. I didn't want to survive. I will pull my hair. But other thing happened also to actually prove that I had come back with different awareness. It was that I was just about to be 3 years old. And after this experience, now I had abilities related with, I could read, I could write, I could resolve mathematical problems. I could put together complex puzzles, and pretty quick, I started to develop a language that was more complex for the age that I had. But still, how could I explain something that nobody around me,
Yes.
even myself, understood?
Yeah. Because no one can, you've had the experience, and trying to put that into words, language is limited because the words you're using, and sitting here conjuring up images, but I bet that doesn't even come close to your experience. And so I feel that in some ways I'm like, oh my God, I wish that I could experience what you've experienced. But I'll get to that. I have a question about that because it's something that you wrote in your book. I think we can get to those experiences without having to leave our bodies. And we'll definitely talk about that in just a second because I don't want to lose the flow of your NDE. Some things that you were saying, Ingrid, that really touched me. You were mentioning how anytime you thought about something, you were there, right? So that just reinforces to me the power of our thoughts and our intentions. So that's a very beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yes, and I will like second the power of our intention. And I want to understand that we have to always be very conscious of the way we think, the way we talk, the power of sound, the willingness. Is like, and this is like when you are mentioning how hard this was, and that you just mentioned now that you wish to have an experience like that, because I have heard that from many people, and I said no,
No, yeah.
I don't wish this to anyone, because especially if you are a child, because I have learned through my own experience and many other NDEers is that for an adult, it takes between 15 and 20 years to integrate these experiences. And for a child, it takes between 30 and 40 years to integrate this. So it's not like it happened and like, oh, tomorrow and you're using all these gifts or whatever. No, it takes so much. And for me, if it wasn't, like I mentioned in my talks, in my books, if it wasn't for what happened after, because right after my NDE, I started to have what we know today as out-of-body experiences, which was not even something I understood back then either.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what was happening to me. And then after that, when things got the worst, I reached a point, Pooja, that I didn't even want to be touched. I say, thankfully, two things happened in my parents' life. They were too busy. Colombia was a country at war, and they didn't have the money to really bring me to any kind of doctor, like psychologist or something, or I would have ended with medication. Or another thing, my mom was a very patient woman. So it was few things happened that helped me and kept me from being medicated or something. The other thing is that when I started to have these out-of-body experiences, I was being like brought back to that realm of the light. So I started to sleep a lot. And although my parents fired that lady, they got a new lady.
I would.
This new lady, again, they get busy. And if that child is sleeping a lot, oh, of course, I don't have to take care of that child. Yeah. And I was sleeping a lot because I was going to that place of peace and quiet and feeling so good. And it was in one of these journeys that I started to see what I call beings of light. And this was what actually, I would just say, saved me and kept me going for all my childhood and the rest of my life, pretty much. But what happened is, in one of these journeys, I one day was surrounded by starlight figures that were shining in all different colors. And imagine this, just like you're at night looking at the sky full of stars. Imagine this, but it was all light, and I'm seeing starlight figures shining in all colors. And I'm like, wow. And in one of these journeys, one of these starlight figures shining in pure gold approached me and shaped itself into human form. And kind of to show me, look, we're the same. And it touched me. And it's when I said, you are a being of light. And from that day on, I started to now have this connection. But again, I could not be the child that is left forever. We need balance.
Yeah.
And at this point, I wanted to sleep a lot. So the way this balance presented was one day I'm taking a shower. I'm all relaxed in the bathroom, and suddenly I see a like shiny light that was blue intense, and it's shown in the bathroom. And I'm like, oh, now the beings of light are here. And from that day on, I started to see them everywhere, and I felt that sense of home and the sense of, oh, now I wanted to play with my sisters, and I was joyful, and I was like feeling that sense of belonging. And something really important I have to mention is that years later, again, when I'm integrating everything, years later, I realized what home is. It was based on that experience. It's like, oh, I get it. When I started to see the beings of light here and I felt the state of home, it's when I had the realization I don't have to go anywhere. Home is not a place. Home is a state of being. And then, although at that point of my life, when I started to see here the beings of light, they didn't say or do anything. When it was the sense of that, oh, just feeling good. And the moment I started to hear them talking up to that point, for a while, I could sense them. I could smell them, just being like in surrounded by flowers, the most exquisite smell. And I could see them. And the moment I started to be able to hear them is when one night they were calling me for dinner. I was now close to 5 years old. They're calling me for dinner. And I'm not going because I could not relate with my name. And up to this point, every time they call me Ingrid, it was this sense of like, gosh, don't call me like that. And then I didn't come. The lady came and like, we're Ingrid, we're calling you for dinner. And I said to her, don't call me like that. That's not my name. So she's like, then what is your name? How should I call you? She's just out of it. And I'm like, it's when I answered to her, I do not need a name. And she's like, oh gosh. They sent me to bed because imagine this girl throwing these tantrums. And I'm crying, and it's when I hear a voice, very soft, very loving, very compassionate, and like whispering me like in a secret. It's going to take time for them to understand that names are not needed in the realm of the light. And it's when I felt that, oh, I understand that I'm not crazy. I now understand why I don't need a name. But of course, later I understood that names are needed in our physical experience. They carry energy, they're beautiful, but it was that clarity. I know now why I don't need a name. And then it's when also the beings of light told me that it was best if I didn't talk about them because people were not going to understand. But imagine, Pooja, for me, like, what is not to understand? It's my reality. And I'm like, what is happening? But then that those understandings started to open more and more. And it's when also they said to me that I was going to always be with them, that I was never going to be alone, and that there was going to be people in my path that was going to help me. And then incredibly, one of the first people there to validate my experience and to help me was my mom.
Yes, yes. That's another very beautiful story. I don't want to give away all the stories because your book is so amazing. I actually want people to read it, so I won't ask you that question now because I don't want to give it away. But when you said something and I don't want to miss it, so I'm going to repeat it. You said something very beautiful, Ingrid. You said that home is not a place, it's a state of being. So that does bring me to that question. Can we connect to this home while we're still in this body?
Yes, yes. And I would just say yes, yes, and yes. And we don't need to have a near-death experience just by learning to calm the mind,
Mm-hmm.
quiet the mind. Besides having my near-death, I don't think maybe over time I could have been able to probably hold that state if it wasn't because people like my grandmother and my mom came to my path. My mom taught me to pray, the power of prayer, and my grandma taught me to meditate.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to meditate since I was 8 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And then, thanks to all that, I was able to sustain that
Mm-hmm.
elevated state of being. So it was that place where I could go be quiet. And I started over time learn, oh, that quietness is space within.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was able to sit in that space. And nowadays people say, oh, I'm too busy to meditate too. And the way I teach meditation nowadays is that, again, is included in life. I said meditation is not a doing.
Mm-hmm.
Again, meditation is a state of being. At the beginning, it might feel like it's a little bit of doing because we have to change the ways in which we have programmed our system, our mind to be. So I said to people, what do you do when you are making your coffee in the morning? No, nothing, checking my phone. What
Mm-hmm.
about you just pause and breathe?
Mm-hmm.
One conscious breath. Just give yourself that. And little by little, when you feel, oh, it feels good,
Mm-hmm.
I want to give that, more of that to myself. I said to people, when you're in your office or at home, what do you do when you walk from your office to the bathroom? Be
Yeah.
present. Walk in presence.
Yeah.
Give yourself that even few steps in presence
Mm-hmm.
there. What do you do? Even I said to people, when you flush the water, think with conscious presence, I'm flushing all my troubles, all my worries
Mm-hmm.
are being present, present, present. So,
Mm-hmm.
yes, and when we do that with intention that you mentioned before and with the willingness to be present, then we start touching that place of silence, touching that place of presence, connectiveness. And what we do is that we start connecting with that inner wisdom. And we start connecting with the creative thinking of the universe. And that creative thinking of the universe carries the voice of the beings of light, ascended masters, guides, God, the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That is so beautiful, Ingrid. When I was listening to you talking about the breath, there is something that I recently discovered that just popped in my head, so I'll share it as well. I was listening to somebody, I can't remember their name. He's a teacher, he's a spiritual teacher, and he was talking about the Hebrew tradition. And the name of God in Hebrew tradition, I think, is Yahweh. But he said that when you say those words, because they don't use the vowels, it sounds like the breath. Like, isn't
Yeah.
that? Yeah. And then when you were speaking about that, I thought, oh, yeah, of course, that's what's connecting us to Source. You know.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's beautiful, beautiful. Uh, I know that from reading your memoir that you've had several encounters with those beings of light throughout your life. Sometimes you experienced them frequently, sometimes there were periods of time that you didn't. And they taught you some really beautiful lessons. It's in so many of them are in the book. I have to tell you, I have ruined your book with underlining, and I have to go back and read some of that. But is there a favorite lesson or is there a favorite something that they shared with you that you could share with us?
Oh gosh, there's just so many teachings about, and there was teachings that happened when I was younger that I needed at the time, and
Yes.
those teachings that had happened throughout the last years when after I experienced what I call my big awakening, that are like deeper and with that carry a lot more realizations and depthness. But I think one thing that they said to me when I was very, very little, and it was that sense of trust. Trust. When you are in that space of silence, open yourself to that inner trust, because it was like, let yourself rest calmly in the hands of the divine. But I was very resistant, and all of us resist and resist. But sometimes that resistance is what brings also the contrast to
Yes.
at some point crack the ego open.
Yeah.
Because the more we resist, the more challenges we would encounter. And when people read my book, they realize that my resistance at some point was such that I had to experience many sufferings to finally fall into what we call the dark night of the soul and crack the ego open. And that's what I call the big awakening. But they also say something which I think is very important, because when people ask me about the beings of light, they said, how you know they were not lying to you? They were not these weird, some people say, these evil things or these weird voices there. And I said, I love that question. And I said, because they always guided me to look within.
Mm.
Ever encounter a guide or a teacher or a master or a guru at any level, physical or in the realm of the spirit, in the realm of the light, that is telling you, I am. I am the teacher. Look at me. Direct your attention to me. Run. That's a red flag. Run fast.
Thank you.
The
Yes.
beings of light always guided me within. And I was very little. It is written in my book when they said, don't believe anything we said. Listen to it, experience it yourself. Have an open mind. Open mind is the door to all possibilities.
Yeah.
But they always guided me, look within. Connect with your inner guidance, with your inner truth. And then that's when they are guiding you to know you are the guru, you are the master of your own temple.
And I know some of the work that you're doing the same thing. You're helping others to look within. That's incredibly beautiful, Ingrid. Thank you. Thank you. I know we were talking earlier and you mentioned, you work with a lot of people that have had trauma and other things. So thank you so much for using your experience to help us. Another thing I noticed from your book, you really had a very challenging life. And some of the things that I was reading, they are my worst nightmare, and you have lived it and you've come out of it. So that gives me hope. But also, was it hard for you to integrate? You were on the other side experiencing that expansion, the love, the bliss, the compassion, but you also lived and worked in a war zone. So much violence around you, Was it hard for you to kind of integrate both those experiences? How was it like?
It was very hard, especially because those days I was going through my years of resisting. So I had, in a way, and I talk about in the book, disconnected from my own, disconnected from the beings of light. It was a period in my life when, and people ask me, how could you do that? How could you disconnect with them? And I said, imagine it's like, I give the analogy, imagine it's like when you go to college, you leave home. It doesn't mean that you dish your parents and forgot that they exist and they are in the forgotten. No, what you do is that you leave home and your parents, in this case, the beings of light 2, were one call away. I got so busy and so distracted that I never called them for a while. It doesn't mean they were not always present. I was the one that, let's call it, lower my vibrational frequency, didn't have the phone ready to call, and then I disconnected. And that's when this connection happened in a way. So those days that I was in the war zone, I was working as a scientist with the Colombian Navy. I was more into the part of dealing with more like the dramas, the victimhood, the being involved in the drama. And is when I realized the little amount of tools we have when we're trapped in the narrative, when we're trapped in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And this experience in the war zone was like what opened the door later to realize how disconnected I have become.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that because I went through all these experiences when I was younger and all these sufferings that I at this point already I have a big level of empathy and compassion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But later, and when people read the book through more sufferings that came from being in the war zone and almost dying from typhoid fever and a bunch of stuff, it was like pretty much the life itself was telling me, Ingrid, you go back and connect again or you will keep suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And that was finally that
Yeah.
is that crack that ego. And I realized, look, when I'm connected, I have more tools. When I'm connected, I have the way to respond.
Mm-hmm.
And I become respond able.
Mm-hmm.
Here I was disabling myself. I lost my power. I lost my connectivity. I lost my capacity to respond. And then I had to regain it again. Remember, you're this powerful being. Remember who you are.
That is incredibly profound. Remember who you are. And I know you're helping others do that. Do you want to talk a little bit about your work? I would love to know what you're doing and how we can find you, the best way to connect with you.
Yes, and helping people to reconnect with the truth that they are. Some people come to me and say, can you give me the answer from the being so loud? Can you? And I said, no, my work is not disempower you. My work is empower you, to teach you how you connect with the being so like yourself, with that inner wisdom, with your inner truth, with the wisdom and the creative thinking of the universe. So it's like, yeah, I work one-on-one sessions. I also do mentorings. I do classes where I guide people to connect from, look, the body, even the senses that at the beginning are just the surface physical reality, these are portals to awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So we start paying attention, what I am sensing, seeing, what is this guiding me to now? My emotions, what are my emotions guiding me to see? My body, where does it feel? Because trauma brings us to disembody. When we disembody, we disconnect. Because if the beings of light told me something very powerful, oneness starts within. And when we're looking and talking about this world of unity and oneness, we're looking out there. No, if we're not integrated, connected within, and integrated with all aspects of ourselves, how does it feel? Where does it feel? How can I nurture myself? Knowing love is something that happens within. How can I nurture this aspect of me that is in pain, that is alone, that has not been seen? And then we start cultivating it from within. So I bring people to offer the techniques, the tools, and healing happens like, and not just healing at the level of the body, because if we just only heal at the level of the body, it can happen again. It's healing start happening at the level of the cause.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And I will have all your, wherever we can connect with you, I'll have all your links in the show notes, Ingrid. Absolutely. And where we can find out about your classes, I'll have all those links included for those that are watching and those that are listening. I don't feel like letting you go because I feel like we're learning so much. I read somewhere, I think it's in your book, and you say that there is no death, only life. Would you comment on that?
Yes, and this is one of the amazing gifts, I have to say, that I received from my first near-death experience. And it was that knowing that I am an eternal being, that it was, and little by little, it was that realization that Ingrid is just a parenthesis in the eternity of who I am. And we just come and go. We just, and I could just say, even at this point, like, there is not death, there is only life. Like, it's like we have never died because we have never been born. In reality, in what our inner, in what our, the eternity of our soul is just this permanent life. And we just cycle through what I will call different costumes.
Yeah.
So it's just this incredible knowing takes away a lot of the fear. Yes. I would not say that there's no other fears that come in life related with other things, but losing that fear of death gives you this sense of enormous freedom. And this is not in my book because this just happened recently, but I had last year I had another encounter with death. Call it near death. I was in a surgery, and during this surgery my blood pressure dropped, and I went into the state of hypothermia. And when all this is happening to my body, I went to, again, this elevated state of being. This is going to be my, let's call it, third near-death experience or encounter with death. And in this experience, Pooja, it was the first time from the two other times. This was the first time that I was asked if I wanted to stay or I wanted to go.
Wow.
Yes. And incredibly, somebody asked me, that is not a question that people usually are not asked to decide. They will tell you,
you have to go back.
It's no time for you. Then the moment I am asked this, I just look and I'm like, when I was asked, do you want to stay or you want to go? Or the moment that I felt like I was given this choice, I was back in that state of, oh, like if I was in like a 10-diamond resort, like, oh, this just feels so good. Of course I want to stay here. And then when I heard, oh, you want to come back, at that moment, because I have practiced presence, awareness, connectiveness, being in that state of self-realize, awakened being, at this moment, Pooja said, is this a test? And then when I said these words, it was that sense of like, if God is everything there is, I said, so where is here and where is there?
Oh my God.
I had that complete knowing. There is no here and there is not there. Again, see, home. Home is not a place. It's a state of being. There was something I always say in my talks. I always say that when my near-death experience happened when I was so little, when people ask me, how can I remember? I say, it's because the door never closed. Years later, the being so light said to me, Ingrid, of course the door never closed because there is no door.
There is no door.
Yeah. The door is all the beliefs, all the ideas, all the programming, all the stuff that is put there. And now we limit ourselves. So imagine at that moment, when I had this experience, it was like, God is all there is. Consciousness is all there is. I am already there. I am already there. And then at that moment, the only thing I said was, keep me where I can serve God the most. And then the moment I said, incredibly, up to this point, Pooja, in that experience, I did not have any attachment. This is what always happens. You're free from attachment. You're just completely in your state of conscious being. There's no attachment. So at that moment, I'm not thinking about what you will feel here, like, or judgment, or thinking, oh no, I have to be with my son or my husband or my family. There's none of that. You're in the state of just, everything is all right.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing to fear. Nothing is out of completion. Everything is just being experienced as it should be. So let's call it a state of equanimity, or in complete presence with what is. So there was not to this point the sense of like, oh, my son, no. But the moment I said, keep me where I can serve God the most, is when the thought, anything that could pull me down to go back to my human experience came. Then now I'm like, oh, the attachment for my son, for my husband, for my family, all these things that keep us living a human experience.
That is beautiful. That is absolutely beautiful, Ingrid, because I don't know if this is right, correct or not, but while listening to this, you know what struck me? When you said, that keep me where I can serve God most, and then your attachments, you came back. I didn't even think about it, but all of the things we experience and all of our relationships and all of the things we do for family, all of that is an act of service, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing about this that I want to bring now, which is that what this last experience gave me. Look, when people ask me, can I have a near-death experience? Can I do this? Why do we ask for this? Because in reality, what we want to experience is life, expansion, beingness. So I said to people, what if we don't talk about near-death experience, but near-life experience?
Yes.
Let's use this opportunity here, this human experience, to an opportunity for all these contrasts, all these things. What is this bringing me to feel deeper, to connect deeper, to use every emotion, everything? Where does it feel? Why is it here? And be present. I said, people, what is in the way is the way. Use every one of your challenges, your emotions, your feelings, your opportunities as a way to fuel your awareness. So I don't call it, every challenge, I call it challenging opportunity. This is an opportunity to empower myself, an opportunity to be present, reconnect, and become respond able.
Yes.
I said, you can be, and that is that willingness and that intention of being. This is the other thing. When the beings of light, when I asked them, I had what I call my big awakening. I was still working at the time for NASA, and I'm like, how can I tell these people how this feels, this state of openness, expansion, present, knowing, wisdom. And then it's when the answer came, and the beings of light said to me, do or say nothing. Because I was thinking, what can I do or say? Do or say nothing. And they say, your state of awareness, the light of your awareness is all they need. And it's when I realized, is that beingness. Again, just be that. And from that place of being, again, that pause, that breath, that name of what we call God.
Yes.
Yes. the answer comes and the action comes and the words come. When people say to me, then what do I cross my arms and I am in stillness and do nothing? And I said, no, stillness and movement are dancing together.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Actually, you also, just listening to you, also another thing popped in my head is one of my favorite verses in the Bible where Jesus says, let your light shine. And the
Yes.
beings of light, you know, they're telling us the same thing, that that's all we can do is to just be and shine. And
Yeah.
Ingrid, you are a shining light. You are. I love listening to you. I don't want to let you go, but I know we're running out of time. And I just wanted to, the last thing I want to do, I want to read my favorite quote from your book. If with your permission, may I do that?
Oh, yes, of course. Thank you.
So
I
I'm
am
gonna hold it up. I'm gonna do a shameless plug for your book because I love it. There is so much more in the book than what we've discussed. So if anybody's looking for a great book for a spiritual retreat or a book club, this is your book. So I'm gonna read my favorite quote. Nowadays, I can sense love everywhere, even while I'm drinking a glass of water every morning. I sense that I'm drinking pure energy and bathing all my being with it. It is so pleasing and refreshing, a magnificent way to start the day filled with gratitude. I have also realized that love is not about being in love with someone. It is about being in love with life. From there, you will be able to truly love anyone, starting with yourself. I love this quote. Thank you for writing this book. Thank you for taking the time to come and speak with us today, Ingrid. And I wish you the very best in everything that you're doing in shining your light.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. And I'm just so happy to be able to share.
Thank you. Thank you.